We're going to talk about a couple of Quillette articles that have come out quite recently, talking about the IDW. And the first one was talking about whether the IDW is intellectually diverse, and then a follow-up article as well. We're going to talk about some of the criticisms of the article, but I'd like to start, because I know that you're a fan of this tactic, by steel-manning that particular argument. If you were to restate the argument in a way that you think is more accurate than was made, how would you do that?
Well, I think that's a great question, David. I think that part of the problem is that there are a lot of different skeins running through this discussion, and it's hard to pull them apart. One of which is that some people within the IDW are fans of the term classical liberalism. And I'm not necessarily for it or against it. It's just not a term that I tend to apply to myself. And I don't think that sufficient care has been taken to say that some members of the group or movement or what have you use that label while others do not. And so there's a bit of a pressure at the moment to say, well, you guys all call yourself classical liberals. And I just don't think that that's the case. So that would be the first sort of steel manning is that I would want the critique to be more careful about saying that it's limited to those who identify as classical liberals. And then the author has every right to try to make the case that the classical liberal position is in fact a version of conservatism. But I certainly don't think of myself as a classical liberal first and foremost. I think of myself as somebody who has progressive, conservative, and libertarian feelings on a variety of different issues. I think that's why all of these positions continue to be explored with no particular political viewpoint ever becoming dominant. Because if we're really truly honest with ourselves, when we say we're conservative or liberal or progressive or what have you, we're usually talking about kind of the leading note or tone that we are expressing. And I think that when people are incautious and they say, well, I am a staunch libertarian or I am a committed conservative, then what they're doing is that they're exchanging sort of a degree of resolution for a degree of clarity. And a lot of people appreciate that clarity on the front end. I pay a fairly heavy price by saying I'm not a free speech absolutist. I'm very much associated with free speech, but there are lots of ways in which I can't stomach certain kinds of free speech outcomes. For example, child pornography is not something that I would stand behind under free speech. Far from it. Many of us pay a hefty price for appearing to purists to be mealy-mouthed, if you will, when I say that I'm not necessarily anti-tribal. I'm not necessarily, anti-progressive or pro-progressive or anything like that. So I suppose what I'm thinking is that there's been a critique made of the wing, if you will, of the IDW, as if it was the totality of the IDW. And that wing is being faulted in the minds of the authors and others for an insufficient layer of or level of resolution. And I think that those of us who paid a hefty price for saying, well, I can't be tied to an absolutist position on any of this stuff, really did so because we want to keep a very high level of resolution. And so I think that there's a series of trade-offs. There's no way of pleasing everybody. I think when it comes to what the article was trying to do and trying to say, there's a further refinement, and that has to do with the fact that if you break progressivism or the left or whatever you want to call it into the traditional liberal core of the left, and then you augment that with a fairly recent, extremely aggressive upgrade, which appears to be willing to attack reason, civility, as agents of oppression, or tools of oppression. I think that upgrade is really what is it at issue and a question, what is being questioned. And if you believe that upgrade, that extremely postmodern adjustment to classically progressive positions, if you think that is now the new dominant left and it's not going away, you probably take a fairly dismissive attitude towards the entire left of center canon of thought. And I would say that there are members of the IDW who believe that this current aggressive strain has displaced classically liberal or classically progressive positions, which will never return, and that we now need to deal with the fact that that upgrade is permanent. And those people have probably decided that they are going to abandon any hope in a left of center position. Well, if I held that position, that upgrade, if you will, that marginal difference in a level of aggression and a willingness to attack reason and data and evidence and itself in favor of tying people in knots logically and epistemologically, if I thought that was permanent, I would understand exactly why these people were completely abandoning any kind of high-resolution view of the left. Now, it happens that I understand why they're saying that, but I disagree. I believe that many people are fairly moderate and liberal in their views and are going through a period akin to the McCarthy era, which I've called left-Carthyism, in which it's very dangerous to simply say the obvious, which is when you're attacking reason or one of two genders or concepts as abstract as patriarchy or anything like that, you probably made a fairly significant wrong turn somewhere in your thinking. And while it might be too difficult and too dangerous for most people to explore their own relatively moderate left of center positions, I don't think that the reasonable left or the analytic left or the traditional left has gone away. I just think that it's been terrorized into a sort of hibernating state. And I think that's a major difference between the sort of right-leaning portion of the IDW and the more left-leaning portion of the IDW. And I think, I may disagree with the people who are in the more right-leaning portion, but that's what makes it interesting. Certainly why I'm listening to them and saying, you really think this is permanent? You think this is never going back? Now, what's very new, if I understand it correctly, is that Claire is suggesting that we are caricaturing the left.
This is Claire Lehman, the Quillette editor.
Correct.
Yeah.
That Claire and her author, Yuri, who she's publishing, are making the point that we hear frequently, that the new upgrade to the sort of left orthodoxy, it's not that it's new in terms of nobody's ever heard it before, but it's never been as dominant to my way of thinking as it is now, that upgrade probably has more to it than we would imagine. And I think we're very interested to hear why Claire believes that. I definitely believe that people are discounting too much of what is going on the left. I mean, the left has had a tremendous number of huge successes with gay marriage or cannabis legalization, and greater awareness, let's say, of gender fluidity issues. I think that these are all things that are long in coming and are super important. And I think that they are sort of representing the best qualities of the left. The question of whether the new highly aggressive strain has something new to say, that's fascinating. I was kind of unaware that Claire believed that. So if the idea is that viewing everything through a racial lens and disputing whether or not lived experience trumps any kind of objective experience, if that is in fact some sort of an innovation, I'm pretty unaware of it. And I've heard this a lot. I've heard that these ideas are now carrying the day on the left side of the aisle because they represent some understanding about the limits of rationality. And that's one hell of a meeting I seem to have missed.